money is one way of getting honor, you have to really put yourself in someone's position and try to see the world from the way they perceive it. And even if it's totally foreign. So I think that, someone who can't talk, who's very upset, right? What is going on with them, right? Like what is, and it's really like, it's like a detective. Like you have to be like a detective, because it's like, someone who is like very autistic, who can't speak. Then when I became a comedian, I was talking about all those experiences, and I was applying all of that to my I was talking about religion, and this was when Trump first started running for office, and he was saying all these things about Islam, and because it was topical, I was talking about my experiences with people who are Muslim, and traveling with people who were Muslim, who were like autistic, and like these kind of stories. And because of that, I really went viral in the Pakistani community and in the Muslim community. Live apart for everyone to be. Since you're recording, I'll start that over. We were talking about the family, and I was saying that
Isn't it fine? Like I wanted to like take out a something raw, like
yeah,
a
please.
candid conversation. Yeah.
No, exactly. So like, I was just going to start the sentence over because so people got it. We're talking about the
Okay.
family, and I was saying that that like the difference between sort of the Eastern extended family, joint family system, and like the Western very individualistic nuclear family system, which is new for us too. People don't realize that it's new, but the like our system raises the cost of having children so much more, because you have to like outsource all of the things, like you have to find a way to have people watch your children. And you have to pay them money to do that. You can't just have family do it, and you have to find like extracurricular activities for them to do instead of just playing with cousins. And so I've thought about like moving to New York City or moving to LA, but like my wife and I sat down, we were trying to figure out like, okay, what would we have to do in order to sort of replicate having family nearby? Because like I said, was talking to you earlier, my in-laws live across the street, my parents live nearby, my my kids are always around like their aunts and stuff, and that's unusual for white people. And I think that we would have to, it would cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to replicate that. I mean, basically, we would have to hire people, to watch our children, to entertain our children. And so, because of that, I think, people talk about like, oh, well, like our birth rates are going down. And it's like, well, what do you want us to do? Like, it costs so much money to people, just are like, we can't afford it. And they can't figure out why they can't afford to have like several children or have even one child. And it's because of this, I think. It's because, even though we're so wealthy, like you have to be extremely wealthy to have a bunch of kids and a nuclear family. It's just not possible. So like, I'm Catholic, and there's a bunch of like Catholics who have big families. But like when you press them on like, okay, well, how do you afford that? It turns out they make tons of money, or it turns out that like they like they make lots of money being influencers on how to have lots of kids. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't really count. Like, you know, so
That's funny. Like they are
yeah.
the influencers and influencing people how to make a lot, how to have raise a lot of children, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of like people who um, like make a lot of money uh, teaching people how to make money, and it's like, well, that doesn't really count. Like I'm not gonna like trust your advice, because the real advice is to become an influencer who teaches people how to make money, and then you can make a lot of money. So like, yeah,
Here, if you visit a town, a person would have 10 children. That's normal.
Sure.
5, 10. Yeah, here in Pakistan. You have been here, you might have noticed. But
Right. Yeah.
same is the case in the cities. Like the cities, the urbanization is changing that culture,
Hmm.
having one child, two child. That's how it's going
Yeah. I
on.
mean, there's a certain sort of natural um, like decline in birth rate just because um, people get married later, and that's sort of like that's normal. That's a normal kind of urbanization and like improved living standards that decreases child bearing just because people get married later. But there's also something else going on where people are not having lots of kids. So there's like it doesn't get down to like one or two without something else going on.
What's that that's going
Oh,
on?
I
Like,
think it's just like uh the it's not just the increase in living standards, it's also the culture or uh the like we were talking about, like the family structure. When the family structure breaks down, it makes having kids very expensive. And so
yeah,
and not just expensive, but overwhelming, because when it's your job to like watch your kids all the time, like
yeah,
that's exhausting. And like I love my kids, but like I do not want to be like, my wife and I don't want to be like 24. Like it's not natural for like two people to be in charge of kids like all the time. Like you need like they need to be around other family, and like you need support structures. Like it's not just, I think about marriage and how one thing that's happening in the U.S. is that people don't have friends. People are, not having close relationships, and there's like a lot of people report just not having many friends, and like your spouse can't be your only friend. And like if it is, I mean, if they are your only friend, like my wife's my best friend. I love my wife, but like if she was the only person that I ever talked to, like all of the like the stuff in your life just gets dumped on that one person, and that makes having a spouse overwhelming. And so just everything becomes overwhelming because you're not spreading out your sort of emotional life, uh your social life, and so all of that just kind of, like having like not having any help with raising your children makes just the normal day-to-day tasks of parenting just overwhelming.
do you think, Jeremy, that this capitalism has made us like this, like just looking for the money, always working and working?
Sure.
N-
Sure. I mean, I think that money is one way of getting honor. I think that like we think that we've moved past like the honor culture, um, like especially in the South, in the South of America, not South America, but where I live in the South. Um, we think that like we used to be like an honor culture, and we've moved away from that. Um, and so like we don't like we don't like duel anymore. We don't like we don't have duels, and we don't and so like we think we've moved towards more bourgeois virtues, because of capitalism, because of the market. But I think that like money is like so we don't have ways of like systems of giving people honor and respect. And so and people need that. People need respect. They need to know their place, and to be for like the community to respect them for something. And right
and that's
now,
natural, very much natural.
yeah, very, very natural. And you can't get rid of that. Like you can't get rid of that instinct. Um, what's happened, I think, is that it's just moved to money. So like money is how you get that now. And or you can get that by being famous. You can get that by having lots of followers. But that's usually like online. Like none of my neighbors care that I have lots of followers. Like so, but what they would care about is like um uh who has like a new car, or who has so yeah, I feel like but like there are in history, like in everywhere around the world, there are non-financial ways of getting honor where you are respected, where you have events where people like toast you and like, say wonderful things about you and celebrate you. And it doesn't require like earning money. And so I think that um like a lot of the greed, to like for lack of a better word, is just a way of trying to get honor when we don't have those systems anymore of respect, of you know like I mean, and you can see that in how we treat our old people, because our old people can't make money anymore. And so what happens to them? They don't have any honor or respect. You can see that with how we treat people with disabilities, where who can't make money, or people who are intellectually disabled who can't make money, where like there's no there's very little mechanism for the culture to honor them and respect them just for who they are, just for like being delightful or whatever. Instead, it's like, we try to find some way for them to make money or whatever. We give them these weird jobs and stuff. And so yeah, I think that's a real gap in like our understanding of what humans need, and when they don't get that, what else they try to, for right now it's just money or fame.
All right, you have summed it up really well.
Yep.
So, Jeremy, what did you move towards? I have read a few blogs about you that you have been helping disabled people, and from
Hmm.
there, like how to make them laugh, how to make them
Hmm.
comfortable over there. So you started. Then you thought that you are really talented, and you went into this stand-up comedy.
Hmm. Hmm.
So would you like to just tell us a little bit
Sure.
how
So
did that journey started?
yeah, so I worked with people with intellectual disabilities, so people with Down syndrome, autism, and things like that, and usually adults. And but during that time, so I did that from the age of 15 to like the age of 30, and it's interesting to have those relationships because you really have to, um, unless you're bad at it, but if you want to be good at it, you have to
Hmm,
really put yourself in someone's position and try to see the world from the way they perceive it.
hmm,
Um, and even if it's totally foreign. So I think that, someone who can't talk, who's very upset, right?
hmm,
What is
hmm,
going on with them, right? Like what is, and it's really like, it's like a detective. Like you have to be like a detective because it's like, someone who is like very autistic, who can't speak, if they're
hmm,
constantly upset about something, what is it? Well, um, like you go through all of the things and like it, and then like later, like it turns out like you finally figure it out that it's the laundry detergent, right? That it's the type of detergent you're using it when you wash the clothes, and it's irritating their skin and they're uncomfortable, right? And but like that's, and then when you figure that out and you change it and they are not upset anymore, right? Like that is like, I love that, like, because you've gotten through all of that fog of distance from someone, and you figured it out, like you you solved the case. And um so I was very good at that. I was very good at these people who are like weird, who I have no idea what they're going through, but I can figure it out, right? I can figure it out. And after a while, if you get really good at that, that I think uh, that sort of ability of empathy, um, but like not empathy in terms of just feeling what other people are feeling, but like really trying to figure out, like, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to try and understand this.
hmm,
That can apply to anything. And a lot of it, and like a lot of the time that I spent with people with disabilities was very funny. Like they're very funny people. Like there's lots of humor. There's lots of really dark humor. Anyone who has worked in the field knows that like caregivers have a very dark sense of humor because there's so much absurdity and there's suffering and there's pain and you're trying to figure it out. Um, like all of that, I think, translated into me applying that to comedy, where um, I was very interested in the world. I was also very smart. I loved reading. I loved, learning about things. I'm very religious. I like learning about religion and how people experience it. But I also have this understanding that like I don't know. Like I don't know like my approach to like Islam, right? I don't assume that I know. I don't know like like just tell me what it is. Like tell me, and when you have that attitude, I think you can learn really fast. If you have the attitude that like I know, then you'll never learn. You'll never let people correct you and stuff. But like that's always been my attitude is like I want to understand other people, whether it's someone's culture or whether it's someone's religion. I want to understand it like from their perspective, like how do they experience it?
Hmm.
How do they understand it? Not like translating it into my understanding. And I got that because when I was a caregiver, I had clients who were all sorts of cultures, all sorts of religions, including Pakistani, Muslim. And so it was my job to like, I had to like understand them, not just because they were disabled, but I had to understand like Pakistani culture. I had to understand Islam. And like, I had to understand, like, I had to, you know, learn those things from their parents and like how to be a caregiver kind of thing. And like, that was very interesting. And so I learned a lot from that. I learned like not just about Islam from like a class or like I didn't like look up Pakistan on Wikipedia and like learn about Pakistan. Like I learned it from people uh who were those people.
So you have
And
never been to Pakistan before, like while you were learning and
no, no,
doing
no,
this
no, no.
stuff. Okay,
Mm-mm.
right.
No. So then when I became a comedian, I was talking about all those experiences and I was applying all of that to my uh I was talking about religion and this wasn't like this was when Trump first started running for office. Um and he was saying all these things about Islam. And because it was topical, I was talking about my experiences with people who are Muslim and traveling with people who were Muslim, who were like autistic and like these kind of stories. And because of that, I really went viral in the Pakistani community and in the Muslim community. And in the US and pretty much every country that Pakistanis are in, they're very like like we say they punch above their weight. It's like a boxing term where like Pakistanis are like very influential and very successful in like in a lot. And so like in the United States, um like the Muslim organizations, the leadership in the Muslim organizations are very like it's very Pakistani. And so I got booked at all of these Muslim events and all of these, like because Trump was running and Trump was saying these horrible things about Muslims and stuff. And um, and I was someone who was not Muslim, who knew about Islam and was saying things that made sense. And I'm like pretty conservative Christian. So like all of these things, like that was an unusual combination at the time, because at the time the people like defend, and this is still true today, where like a lot of the people who are like very like pro-Muslim are like not even close to like being like Muslims, right? Um, and whereas the people who are the most similar to Muslims are more hostile towards Muslims. Like I always joke about that, where like, if you found someone who was a Christian who prayed 5 times a day and had a big family and like went to the worship every week and like this, and whose wife wore like a head covering. Like if you found a Christian like that, chances are they would not like Muslims, which is weird. Whereas if you find someone who's barely religious at all, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, the Muslims are great," and like so it's always been very very weird to me. And So anyway, that's one reason why I got popular and how I sort of ended up. And then like my friend Sultan, who's from Lahore, he was planning a trip to to Pakistan in 2017, and he was like, "You've always wanted to go. Do you want to come with me?" And so I went and I booked all these shows there as well, and then I ended up on the news in Pakistan and like all this stuff. So. Um, and then a rumor got started in Pakistan that I was actually Imran Khan's son, and like all these things, like just sort of, it all sort of escalated from there. But the backstory, the like origin of it, is just like um, like it's not. I didn't like throw a dart at a map, or I didn't get an assignment like the last day of CIA school or something. Like it's all, it all comes from that, like having to understand people and having to understand um uh things and have empathy and somehow connect, like that moment of finding out the person with a disability has a has, like this is their deal, that like it's the laundry detergent, like that moment is very similar to me, like how I experience it, to the moment of making someone laugh who's like nothing like you, who's from a very different culture, who is like you've somehow been able to connect, like, and that moment of connection is just, I love it, like that's what I live for.
So you got influential. People started like calling you for the events, and you were
Hmm.
booked. So how did you deal with that popularity, that influence?
It was I mean, obviously at first you love it, right? It's like you're famous, and people who don't know you, like
Hmm.
people who you don't know who you are, like that's amazing, right? um it did take a long time, and I'm still not I'm still not great at this. It did take a long time to sort of uh not base your like not base my self-esteem or whatever on like what people say online or how well I'm doing, or because anytime you uh like get famous, or anytime you get like even a little bit of fame, um like you're exposing yourself to so many things, and just so, like, and there's people who will hate you, there's people who will um say horrible things, people who won't understand you, right, who don't understand, um like I'm just this white guy who's just showing up at these like Muslim events doing comedy or whatever, like they don't know anything about me, about like how I think or backstory or whatever. And you sort of have to remind yourself that like these people don't really know you. um like they appreciate your art, or they appreciate like even the people who like love you, like they don't really know you like deeply, and you can make a connection, but like you have to really, so like I had to like come up with rules, like for example I don't take advice um from people who are not comedians, like because I'm getting so much advice from everybody, and like, but like no, like as far as like whether a joke is good or not, um like or whether it's offensive or not, or like, is it okay, like I have friends who are comedians who I trust, and that's it. um and like my emotional life, like am I a good person or not, like that has to come from people that I trust, like my priest or my friends or my wife, like that has to come from those people. It can't come from like, random people online. So that was a hard to to manage. There's another thing that really was hard to deal with, that uh is that like when I first got popular, it was, I was talking about Islam and like and Pakistan, right? And like that's what people sort of wanted to hear from me. They wanted to hear more things from that. Whenever I would meet people, they would ask me about that. They wouldn't ask me about anything else. And I love talking about like lots of things. And there's a frustration that I have even today when I want to talk about something that's very important to me, like people with disabilities, or something going on in the Catholic Church, or there's tons of stuff, and I will get comments or replies that are um, what's your favorite biryani? And it's like, okay, I'm trying to talk about like abuse in the Catholic Church, and you're like, stop, don't talk about that. Like, talk about this one little niche thing that, like, it comes from like, okay, this is what I did for them. And so this is what they think of me, and they've put me in this little box, and they want me to stay there. And but I have to sort of remind myself, like, oh well, they don't like, they don't know me, and it's hard because um, another thing that makes it hard is like you're complaining about fame, right? Which sounds obnoxious. It sounds like it's a very first world problem. It's like, I have so much money, I don't know where to put it. Like that kind of a complaint. It's like, or like, my new Lamborghini is not whatever. I'm not rich, but like that's like a first world problem. But like there is a kind of uh like there is a kind of loneliness that happens where I'm thinking about something, I'm obsessed with something, I'm reading about a certain subject, and I go somewhere and someone stops me and wants to talk about, like, you know, Pakistan. And I'm like, okay, fine, let's talk about Pakistan. But like it's like, you get put in this little peg, and like you want to talk about other stuff. At the same time though, you can't be ungrateful. You can't be like um, you know, like you can't like sort of like brush people off because they want to talk about something that's meaningful to them, and you're in your own little world, and you want, so there is a part of it that sort of draws me outside of myself, where I'm like, okay, I am obsessed about this thing, but here's someone who's followed me for a long time, who like this is what's important to them. So how can I come out of myself and like interact with them? So yeah, it's an ongoing struggle.
All right. So, I just would like to know what's inside your brain when you are on the
Yeah.
stage and
Hmm.
you just come up, see a few random people there on the stage, and do you like before when you are not on the stage, you plan something like you have
Hmm.
something in mind, our stories are playing, something is going
Yeah.
on with in your head. So what's like that when you are on the stage?
Yeah. So I have,
It's
hold on.
really a difficult job to be a
Oh yeah. So
comedian.
right. So I have a set list. I have a like, this is a set list where it's just, this is like a Catholic set list. So these are my jokes, and that's like the order that I want them in. And sometimes I'll hide this on stage. Like, I'll put it on like a uh I love it when there's a speaker in front that's like facing out, because then I can put this on the back of the speaker, and I can sort of, and no one can see it, and I can just sort of glance down at it. But you don't want it to feel like you're reading material. And there are moments where, like, you know I'll think of something on stage. That happens a lot, where I'll tell a joke and people respond a certain way, and I'll start thinking of more things about that subject, and I'll just start riffing, and then when I sort of like lose my place, I'll come back to like what my next joke is and try to segue into it. um and but yeah, and that's usually if I'm doing like an hour or an hour and a half show. Like, I can't, like, my brain is too ADHD for me to actually remember my entire set, especially because, like, I change it so often. I add stuff, I take stuff out, and I can't just memorize like an entire hour. um unless I was going to just do that hour every time I perform for like several years, which is not what I want to do. I want to be more creative. I want to change things. I want to mix things up. I want to experiment with different orders, with different like, you know, I like there being like a narrative structure to my show. So like I start out usually, it's important to me to start out with something that like contains a lot of information about me. Um, so like if I perform at an event and it's a Pakistani event and uh, and there's people there who don't know who I am usually because people bring their family. There's like random like old people. There's like kids that everywhere, and so there's people who don't know who I am who haven't been following me, and I'm a white guy who gets up, and I need to somehow like introduce myself. And so the first thing I do has to like contain a lot of information. So um, like a lot of times whoever introduces me, this is a thing that I say sometimes, is someone will introduce me and then I'll come on stage and I'll say thank you, that was a very lovely introduction. I don't always get good introductions when I travel. Like I was in Lahore and the person introducing me had no idea who I was. And they said, please welcome to the stage, stand-up comedy and recent convert to Islam, Jiminy McLellan. That's how they introduced me. And when I got and everyone went wild like when I came on stage, and they could because they were so excited that I had converted. They were so happy, and then I had to get on stage and tell everyone the bad news that I was not famous comedian Jiminy McLellan, that I was a Christian comedian, Jerry McLellan, and then everyone turned on me. They were like, they scowled at me and were like, did this for the rest of the show because to them I had left Islam, right? I was Muslim for 5 seconds and then I had left, and so that's a story that I tell a lot of times at the very beginning. It's a funny story, but it also contains like the fact that I've performed in Pakistan. Um, it contains the fact that I'm not Muslim, and that I'm a Christian, and like um, and it sort of sets the audience up for like don't be like that crowd, like like kind of accept and that's important for me to get out of the way at the very beginning because where like I'm a Christian, but I'm also someone who is familiar with your culture and who has performed in Pakistan and who knows about Islam, and so like that's very important, like beginning to it. And then like, or sometimes like I'll say that like, I asked all my friends to pray that I would be able to make it here today, to perform, and they all prayed, and because God answers prayer, I'm here today. The problem is that half my friends are Muslim and the other half are Christian, and so there's no way to know which prayers worked, like like which religion's true. I think next time I have to ask like the Muslims to pray that I will make it and the Christians to pray that I won't make it, and then I'll have the atheists send me their thoughts as a control group, right? Like that's another joke that I say at the very beginning sometimes to sort of soften the crowd, but also introduce the idea, like introduce who I am, and because it's important to sort of get that stuff out of the way, because otherwise, like a set isn't going to make as much sense. And so,
So you
and then
make
after
yourself
that,
familiar over there at the place. You make yourself like at home with the audience,
yes,
so they can connect with you. Then
yes,
okay, all right. So,
yes,
so
and like beyond that, I like my set to have, especially a long set, like an hour. An hour is a long time to pay attention to someone talking, especially in our culture, like, and yours soon too, where you'll lose your attention span and you won't be able to pay attention to
we are
anything.
already losing that.
Already there. Okay, good.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
eh, I like there to be like a narrative structure to my set where a lot of times I'll start by talking about growing up, um, and like what I heard about Muslims growing up, and I have jokes about that. And then it'll go to like becoming a caregiver, to like, me with these guys, and then me in and then me going to Pakistan, me trying to learn Urdu, me like and then it'll go to like my kids, like my wife and kids, and then like and then usually like my last joke is about like there's a joke I have about like suspecting that my kids might be Muslim, and that's usually like the end of the set. But like there's a sort of narrative arc to that that I like, and it also helps me remember what I'm going to say next.
Oh, okay, but Jeremy, what role does humor play, like in addressing social issues, political issues? Because I would be coming up to that, to your recent few clips
Sure.
that I have watched. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what role does exactly humor play in your point of view?
Yeah. So I think that one way of thinking about humor and politics and stuff that's very common, and there's some truth to it. It's the idea that if you say um, something without humor, people will not be receptive to it. But if you somehow start with something serious but make it funny, then people will hear it, and it'll help it go down better. That's a very common way of thinking about comedy, and I think that a lot of like late night shows, a lot of comedians write like that, where they have a point they want to make, and they want to push that. Um, the problem is like then humor becomes just a tool for propaganda, um, where like it's just one of the methods you use to push an idea or push an agenda. Um, and that makes people very skeptical of humor, and it makes people sort of try to take what you say that's a joke and find out what you really mean behind it. And I, but so I mean, that's sort of inevitable. People do that, and that's fine. Um, but I think that for me, um, humor is play. It is, and I mean play by I mean something very deep by play, um, where play is something that you do. Um, you can also call it leisure. Um, like play is something that you do when there's nothing else to be done, right? When you and your friends are hanging out, and uh, you're just joking around, you're having fun, or you're creating art. There's no higher reason beyond that. It's like in a way, it's a lot like worship, or prayer, where like you pray to God, right? And um, people will say like like sometimes people will be like, salat is very good for your back. Like they'll have like articles about how like, Muslims have less back pain because they do salat. And it's like, okay, fine, but like that's not why you do salat. Like that's like like you're doing salat because that's something owed to God, and that's the proper thing for humans to do. That's part of this. That's the deepest
That's just
thing.
a byproduct.
Yes, right. It's a byproduct. So that's how I think of humor, where there's no humor and comedy are like the basic sort of reality of the world, where like this is just delight, this is just funny, and so um, what I'll do, like how I write. So yesterday I posted a thing that was like 10 myths about Israel, and like and in there's lots of my opinion in the bit, right? But I also like to write that. What I did was I just Googled 10 myths about Israel and looked up like Zionist websites, and then just read the stuff, and then whatever I like thought was funny about it, or whatever, however I could make it ridiculous, um, even if it didn't contain my opinion, like that's what I love, like stuff that makes me laugh. And I think that like demonstrating humor is much more effective than um, like than trying to like use humor as just a tool of propaganda. Um, it kind of reminds me of because sometimes people will. I've gotten some responses that are like, this is a very serious matter, like, and you're joking about it, and you're telling jokes at this time of genocide or war or whatever. And I'm like, okay, sure. But if you go to um, a funeral for someone, people are joking around. People are telling stories about the person um, while they're crying. They're telling stories that are funny. Um, and that's not like a break from suffering. That's like a deeper reality than suffering. Um, so when that happens, when someone tells a joke at a funeral, it's not like uh, a break from the reality of war. I think it's a deeper reality than war or than suffering. So like, I got people who were, and one thing I've noticed is that when I look at the comments of people who are like, "This is not okay," um, like they're not in Gaza, they're not in Palestine. These are not Palestinians saying this. Um, these are people who are not Palestinian, who live in the West or live somewhere else, and they are watching people die on screen, and they feel helpless. They feel like, and then when someone tries to be funny, it's very offensive to that like detached understanding. Meanwhile, people in Gaza, who you would think would be the most offended, they're saying this is great. We've been sharing this like on our stuff. This is making us laugh, like while they're getting bombed, and like that's always true. It's always true that like people in the situations um, are always using humor. Like humor is always breaking in on their suffering, or coming up out of like in their suffering in a way that like is not uh, like it's like you can't get rid of it. Like you can't get rid of that part of the human spirit that because I think that it's just one of the basic realities of the world.
So those are the deeper realities that you are
Yes.
explaining in a way that you are just quoting in a way.
Yes, and I think that that's something that from what I understand about Islam, I think that that's very true in Islam as well. That the basic reality of the world is good. That it's something that is created, and that it's not fallen. Like Islam doesn't have this like understanding of like original sin where everything is bad. Instead, everything is good, and people forget God, and you have to be reminded of God, and like the fitra, like the like your basic orientation towards God, and that's something that like we believe. We forget that, but that is something that we believe in Catholicism as well. That like um, when bad things happen, that's not like the deepest reality. When suffering happens, that's not the deepest reality. The deepest reality is God, and God's like absolute oneness, and the reality that He created, which is good. And so humor is just a way of letting that break into uh, whatever situation you're in, whether it's war or whether it's a bad day at work.
Just when you were saying this, I had a thought in my mind, and that was when you get when you are in front of an audience, like as you were mentioning that there are so many distractions in our life now. We just with one pop we can just start looking at our phone.
Right.
When there are these much distractions, so at the same time you are there on the stage for an hour, let's say. So but how many people do you think that they are connected with you, and how many you what's the percentage that is distracted?
Well, the good news is that you can tell right away because um, laughter is sort of involuntary thing. People don't like try to laugh, and so you can tell how well you're connecting with the audience by just immediate feedback. Um, Whereas if you're a musician, you don't really know if people are connecting like that easily. Um, you have to sort of wait until the song's over for people to clap. But comedy's brutal because you get instant feedback right away. And it's real feedback. It's like because people can't help themselves but laugh or not laugh. And it's very different from social media, right? Social media is very like if I post something that's a joke, um, or I post a video that's funny that contains a bunch of jokes, people have a moment after watching it to decide whether to like it or not. They get to decide, and they might decide like, I think this is funny, but I don't want other people to like know that I think it's funny. I don't want to like share it because then I'll get in trouble for sharing it. I don't want to like, I get messages from people who are like important people who are like, I really liked your video, but I can't share it or I'll get fired. And I'm like, okay, um, there's a kind of deliberation and that I don't like that you don't get in real life. In real life, on stage, if you say something that's funny, people will laugh. And um, if and sometimes they'll laugh and then say, "Oh, that was terrible," right? But it's too late. You already laughed. Like I already got the laugh. I don't care what you say after you laugh, like because like you have to go by the laughs. And like so in one sense comedy is subjective, different people find different things funny. On another hand, like comedy is like
And
the
they have
most
different
objective.
interpretations. Sorry, and
Sure.
they have different interpretations in their minds.
Yes, right. At the same time though, it's the most objective uh like art form almost. Like I sometimes think this, it's so objective because people like you are getting someone's real response. um you're not getting their like critique or whatever, or their review afterwards, because who knows what that's for. But like laughs are like, you can gauge exactly how good a joke is by how many laughs it gets, by how loud the laughter is, how long the laughter lasts. That's objective, and you can go by that. You are chasing those laughs. And whereas like a lot of times in other kind of performances, you don't really know. You have to sort of like go by other people's opinions or whatever. So
So, how do you balance the intent to entertain with the potential risk of offending someone? Like, if there is any controversy, sparking a controversy, uh, if like there is this Israel Palestine issue, like
sure.
you can uh, like do something that is that you can get a backlash. So, how
Right.
do you like strike a balance?
Right. So I mean, one thing you can do is that um, you know um, so I don't think you should censor yourself when you write. So like when I'm writing, or when
Hmm.
I'm writing with another comedian, there's no censorship. It's just it's the most like it's the worst stuff ever gets said, and like it's like the most offensive things get said or written down or whatever. Um, but before it makes it to the stage, um, then you start asking questions like the audience, because like the whole point of comedy, the first time, I always say this, like the first time someone laughs is when their mother plays peekaboo with them. That's like a very universal thing. Like their parents make faces at them, and it makes them laugh. That's the first time a baby laughs, and it's because they're being surprised by something good. That I think is the very core of comedy, of humor, of laughter. Is it's a response to being surprised by something good. Um, and then I think horror is when you're surprised by something bad. I think that's sort of the flip side of it. And so the question then becomes like, okay, this might surprise people. This joke might surprise people, but is it something good? Are they being surprised by something good? For a lot of people, that good thing is connection. So like they understand me, they understand something about
Hmm.
me. Especially like if I'm performing for Pakistanis and I mention something um, that shows that I know something about them that they don't think white people know. There's like that's sort of a surprising connection, and that's good because connection is good and whatever. Um, on the issue of like Israel and Palestine, there is I'll write something that I think is funny, and then I'll be like, is this like is this anti-Semitic, for example? And so I have friends who are Jewish who are anti-Zionist, and like I want to know, like I send stuff to them, and I'm like, is this funny? And these are like comedians, so like they know, and I'm like, okay, is this funny or is it like anti-Semitic or whatever? So far, they've all said it's fine, but like I have like Muslim friends who are comedians who are like, is this uh like and is this Islamophobic or whatever? But like a lot of times, like for me, like if it's like Islamophobic, then or like I mean, it wouldn't be actually Islamophobic because I like Muslims, but like if it sounds kind of bad, then like maybe I don't say it, or maybe I just put it later in my set, like where they already like me, they already know where I'm coming from. And that's usually what I do is I have things that are more offensive like later in the set after they know, because if you start out like that, if you start out with stuff like that and they don't know who you are, then it's going to take on a totally different meaning, and they're going to be like offended in the sense of being like surprised by something bad. They're going to be and then it's not a comedy show anymore, it's a horror show, which is
Hmm.
not something that I want. um, Part of so I don't think, at least not my comedy, like the purpose of my comedy.
So you get it checked, like simple as that. You get it checked, you write it down, then you share with the specific community, get it
Mhm.
verified, and then you go up on the stage, right?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So in the video I posted yesterday, 10 myths about Israel. One was the myth was that like Palestinians are real people, and that comes from like there's a sort of Zionist propaganda thing that says that Palestinians are not a real people; they're just Arabs, and so there's nothing wrong with them going to other Arab countries or whatever. Um, that's obviously nonsense. But, uh, but I thought about that, about like the idea that it's a myth that they're real people. And um, another thing I always think is that whenever I hear about Hamas's tunnels, um, my mind goes to like an old book called The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. It's a very sort of foundational text in like science fiction. And in that book, there's a point in the future where humans have evolved into two species. There's the Eloi who live on the surface, and there's the Morlocks who live underground, who have devolved into this thing. And every night they come up and they eat the Eloi. Because the Eloi are the privileged and the Morlocks are the ones who live underground. I always think of that, the Eloi and the Morlocks, whenever I think of Hamas's tunnels. And so I said myth number 3 or whatever, Palestinians are real people. Fact, Palestinians used to be real people, but over time they've devolved into a species known as the Morlocks. And then I cut to like a clip of the movie The Time Machine where like the Morlocks come out and they are attacking the Eloi. And um, that was like the one that I was like most skeptical. First of all, it was my favorite one because I love science fiction and I grew up reading that stuff, and I love that. Um, that I was unsure about it for a number of reasons. Number one, I don't know if other cultures read The Time Machine. I don't know if like H.G. Wells and stuff. Like that's something that I grew up reading. My wife got the joke right away, but I don't know how well that will translate into like thing. Um, like so that one I was like unsure of, and I was a little hesitant. I mean, and so like, and it's not that I thought the joke would offend people. It's that I thought that it would sort of accidentally like, people wouldn't
They
like the
won't be able
context
to
wouldn't be there.
understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, they wouldn't understand it, and because they wouldn't understand it, they would understand it a different way. Um, and but it turns out I was right, and like I wasn't. But like that's the kind of thing that goes through my mind, where like sure there's you know like ways to offend people, but sometimes it's like okay, I, like I think that so much goes like just to go back to this, so much rides on establishing a connection right away. Um, and and I noticed this early on because um, like I would be talking about people with disabilities in my set, and um, I realized that I have to put that later in my set because I'm a comedian on stage, and most of the time when someone is on stage talking about people with disabilities, they're going to be making fun of them or they're going to be vicious towards them, and so I would have people like complain and be like, I didn't like that story or whatever. So I have to establish at some point beforehand that I worked with these people for 15 years. I spent most of my life these people longer than comedy, and like I love them. And so I have to somehow establish that very early. And the same thing is true online, where like people, I've sort of established myself online where like people know who I am and where I'm coming from. And so they'll give me the benefit of the doubt if they don't get a joke. Um, but if I were like tomorrow performing for an audience of people who had no idea who I was, then it becomes a different sort of calculation. So yeah.
Okay, so like you are an artist, and
Mm.
I know of being an artist, the ones that I have been in touch, they're very sensitive because they the things that they can feel, we normal people can't feel. That's for sure. So also, like behind your quick fire wit, you might be a serious and intelligent individual. So the events that are happening in the world, or that happen, that you're absorbing. So how do they influence you?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think that you're right about being sensitive. So I I don't consume any media that's visual. Um, that's like I don't look at pictures. Um, I don't look at video of anything that's happening. And because like all like pictures and video are very important to get people to care about what's happening and to realize what's happening. But I already care. Um, and it's not going to move the needle for me anywhere. Um, you know, uh, if anything, it's just going to make me like upset, and I'm not going to be able to do anything. Um, and so that uh, so that's one thing is I sort of I don't expose myself to things like that that will sort of derail my creativity. And so like on Twitter, there's a setting you can have where it turns off media, um, and instead there's just a little link that it shows, and you have to click on the link in order to see the picture. So all I see is text on Twitter. So like that's one thing. Um, I do love, like, so I'll be reading books like let me see, what am I reading right now? I am reading um the book on it's called Zionism and the Roads Not Taken. So it's a book about uh the early ideas about Zionism, and there were lots of different kinds. And the one that has won out was not the only possibility. There are other um, uh, there were other desires, like other kinds of Zionism, like you know like returning to the homeland but not making it a state that was just for Jews, right? But just sharing it with everybody, but still having it be a homeland, right? Things like that. There's all sorts of. So I'm reading that, okay, because I want to understand Zionism, and one reason I want to understand what's going on is because um, I was raised by very conservative Christian people, and they were very against Zionism. They were very especially Christian Zionism. I don't know if you know what that is, but like there's a lot of like Christians in America
Evangelical,
who,
I think that is called evangelical Christian. Those are called
yeah. So evangelical is like only some of those people are Zionists.
okay.
Evangelical is like the biggest like uh, brand of like
Broader.
Protestant Christianity in America. I'm Catholic, but like growing up, like I knew people who were Zionists who were like they were Christians, but they were like they were like the Jews are still God's chosen people, and God gave them Israel, and we have to support them because like in the end times, like there's all this like end time stuff about like Israel, um and my parents were always very, very against that. They thought that was very bad for our faith, for like for Christianity. And even though we didn't know any Palestinians, it was not about loving Palestinians or whatever. It was just about like theologically Zionism is wrong for Christians to believe. And so I'm very interested in Zionism and Americans and all that kind of stuff. Obviously none of this is funny, right? None of this is funny. When I'm reading this, I'm learning. Things will occur to me while I'm reading it, just because I'm a comedian, that are funny, and I will write them down. And I'll write them down like on a separate thing, and then that will, like, so I'm not reading it for material, like for comedy material. Um, like I'm reading it just to understand, because I want to understand, and from that understanding, I know will come humor somewhere down the line, right? At some point, I'm going to be I don't know how, but at some point I'm going to be using what I've learned in some kind of comedy for way, where it's going like this is going to inform me somehow. And the same thing is true of like me learning about Pakistan, about me learning about um, uh, like because think of it like, so if I was just reading this for humor, to write like to make jokes about it, then I'm not trying to understand. Like then I'm not trying to actually get it. If I'm just reading um, like about Pakistan so that I can make jokes, then I'm just using Pakistan as like a tool, or for like I'm just using that to for my own purposes, like to be successful or whatever.
You're
And
just
and
trying to understand that from just one lens instead
yes,
of looking at from different perspectives.
right, because like the stuff that I have that's really good, like like the jokes on stage that like really really are good, or the stuff that does really well online, comes from that original desire to understand. It doesn't come from me just like you know being witty about something that I read, because anytime that I have tried that, where I'm just making jokes like based on like whatever, it's never gone very well. It always involves me assuming things that are not true. Or so like first I want to learn as much as possible, and then from that uh comes humor. Like I actually I love trying to learn Urdu. Like I'm not going to speak Urdu right now. It's too, but like um I love trying to learn it. And like while I'm learning it, I think of funny things to say. But like, you know, like that like humor has to come from like a genuine desire to connect.
So this one would be the last. So how are you like at home, like with your family? Like, are you like a kind of funny guy? Are you just serious?
No, I'm especially with my family, with my kids, I'm funny. And but like yeah, I think I'm funny. But I think that like most stand-up comedians, or I don't know, at least me, I was never like the class clown. Um, like a lot of people who are class clowns, they grew up and they're like businessmen, right? But like it's the nerds in class. It's the dorks who get bullied, who have to rely on humor to survive school. Like they're the ones uh, who end up uh, like as stand-up comedians. So like if I'm in like a really good mood at a party, then I will uh be sort of like a class clown or whatever. But usually I like talking to like one person. Like at a party, I like finding one person and talking to them the whole time. Or but like my wife, on the other hand, my wife is who hates getting on stage, and like she hates having to speak and stuff. She's an architect for the Catholic Church. But like she is someone who she will walk into a room and she will own the room. She will walk around, she's talking to everybody. She is like she's the stereotypical man who is um like because what she does all day is she deals with construction workers and like other architects, and like it's the Catholic Church, so it's a very male dominated. She's having to deal with priests and like so she's the one who people think of as like this is a comedian's personality. But whereas I'm just sort of more reserved and like I'll talk forever, but as you can see, but you know, in at a party or and like a big event, I just stand around.
So behind Jeremy's success is his wife.
That's right.
Uh, yeah, perfect. So thank you so much,
Of
Jeremy,
course, anytime.
for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you. Have learned so many things from you. So